how do you think about decision-making in groups? And I'd like to do this by showing you a magic trick. There is nothing up my sleeves, all right? We have cameras rolling, so it's hard to do a magic trick with cameras rolling, right? But I want to show you something. I think you'll find it kind of intriguing. I'm going to be the chief executive of a company, and we must be a very affluent company because we're going to pick a company car, and we're all getting the same car. The only rule is we all have to drive one make of car. We've had a great year. I guess we must be a hedge fund or investment bankers or something. And we're going to pick a Lexus, a Mercedes, or a BMW. But the only rule is we all have to come to some kind of consensus. So we've got the Mercedes group over here. We have the BMW group over here. We have the Lexus group over here. I ask you, what kind of car do you want to drive? So who would like a Lexus? Raise your hands. Right. Who would like a BMW in the middle? And who would like a Mercedes? Now, whatever I pick, the 2/3 of you, unfortunately, are not going to get your choice. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick a Mercedes. So you're happy? Yay. Other 2/3, well, we got to drive a Mercedes. Whoa, not a good thing. Okay. There is no magic yet. But let me show you something very interesting. This is actually the order of your preferences. So Mercedes, folks, your number one pick, you're the winners so far. Your number one pick was Mercedes, but your number 2 choice is BMW and 3 is Lexus. If I asked you as a group to rank order your preferences, this is your order. Now, if you recall correctly, I picked Mercedes. You guys are happy. Now, the Lexus people said, well, you know, we'd rather have a Lexus, right? Remember, that's our first choice. And the BMW people said, well, you know something? We'd actually rather have a Lexus than a Mercedes, too. We wanted a BMW, right? But if you picked Mercedes, we'd rather have a Lexus than a Mercedes. Lexus was our number 2 choice. Mercedes was our number 3 choice, okay? So you'd rather have a Lexus than a Mercedes, right? And who'd rather have a Lexus than a Mercedes? I'm sorry. I made a bad choice. 2/3 of them would rather have a Lexus. Sorry, I'm going to change my mind. We're going to drive, everybody happy? I'm going to drive a Lexus. Everybody happy? Okay. So I'm now picked Lexus, okay? No problem. Except the Mercedes people say, well, you know we preferred BMW. And actually, we like German engineering, right? We'd actually rather have a BMW than a Lexus. BMW people say, we've always wanted a BMW. Who'd rather have a BMW than a Lexus? I'm sorry. I thought Mercedes, you said Lexus, but now that we pick Lexus, 2/3 of the people would rather have a BMW. So I'm going to switch. I'm going to pick a BMW, okay? Everybody happy? Well, actually, Mercedes people, you always wanted a Mercedes. And Lexus people, come to think of it, you'd actually rather have a Mercedes than a BMW. So who'd rather have a Mercedes? 2/3. Well, wait, 2/3 of you want a Mercedes? Wasn't that my first choice? So what I don't understand here. When I picked Mercedes, you'd rather have a Lexus. When I picked Lexus, you'd rather have a BMW. When I picked BMW, you'd rather have a Mercedes. We call that circular logic. That makes no sense. In fact, it's irrational, isn't it? And by the way, whatever I pick, I'm wrong. I showed this once to a friend of mine. He said, I have that. He lives in Manhattan. He says, I have that every time we go to dinner. Let's go to Greek. We'd rather have Italian. Let's have Italian. We'd rather have Chinese. Let's have Chinese. We'd rather have Greek. Every time with his family. Do you remember something from 3rd, 4th, 5th grade called the transitive principle? If A is greater than B and B is greater than C, then another fancy transition, right? This not only is a principle in math, it's actually a principle in logic. It's the transitive principle. We all learn this. It underlies a lot of the structures that we think of as rational decision making. But we just saw that it doesn't work. What just happened? The transitive principle didn't apply. You preferred Lexus to Mercedes, BMW to Lexus, and Mercedes to BMW. I think if I got my order right. So something just broke down. Something just happened that's very unusual. To understand it, we have to go back to an 18th century French mathematician and social scientist, the Marquis de Condorcet. He was a brilliant writer. He lost his head in the Reign of Terror. I guess that's why we only have a picture of his head. But he unfortunately met the guillotine during the Reign of Terror. And the Marquis de Condorcet proved that the transitive principle is true for individuals and is true for pairs. But when you have 3 or more people and they have 3 or more options, it may or may not be true. That's why it's called the transitive principle. It's not the transitive law. It's only a principle. It doesn't always apply. It doesn't apply to groups. When you had your preferences, you weren't being irrational. You were simply expressing a preference order. You looked irrational because it was circular logic, but circular logic in a group is a perfectly normal behavior for a group of people. The transitive principle doesn't apply to groups. Nothing can overcome that. And what would be irrational for an individual or a pair of people is perfectly rational for a group. So what I find is very often people bring in psychologists, team building coaches to help groups come to consensus and make decisions better. And what they're fighting is not irrational behavior or any kind of psychological defect. What they're trying to overcome is a problem in math and logic, that groups simply don't have the same ability to rank order preferences that people and pairs of people have.